Thank you very much, Ali, of course, and Chancellor Chen, and to you, the audience, for coming out on such a miserable rainy night. Yes, I know, both in Portland, Seattle, or I'm a native of Amsterdam, so this just feels like home. But I've never liked it. It is an honor to be asked to give this second Debra Friedman Lecture. I got to know Debra when she was still at Arizona State University in charge of their downtown Phoenix campus. We worked together in the Coalition of Urban Serving Universities. She was very involved, as was I and my colleague David Perry, in the big survey that we did to try to put together a national overview of what urban serving universities really do and how they contribute to and partner with their communities. And that was part of our big effort to get more federal money into urban serving universities. Of course, then the economy collapsed, and so we never got so much of the federal money, although we were able to get a significant amount of private money for various efforts. When Debra came here, I was very impressed that, she called me several times just to kind of say, listen, you've started as a president, we call it a president, a couple of years earlier, so, what can you tell me? I've always felt that probably women are more likely to do that and ask for advice, and guys are likely to do that. And that she put together this field trip for about, 8 or 10 or 12, I can't remember exactly, of leadership of this institution a couple of years ago to come to Portland and meet with their counterparts, the vice president of this, that, and the other, deans of this, that, and the other, to kind of figure out, okay, how do things work here so that we can learn from it. And when I happened to mention that this morning to my person in university communications, who had been putting together the slides and all that there had been that delegation, he said, oh, that's very interesting because we are actually looking at UW-Tacoma to learn from them how to really be effective in communications, because they really do a good job in communications. So I'm glad to know that this learning is mutual. Debra was a true believer in the importance of urban serving universities, in access, and in the research university, and she is, of course, sorely missed. So my story today is really to talk mostly about Portland State. I may bring in a couple of examples of Illinois, Chicago, or Baltimore. And as you all know, this is not because I think that this is the only way to go about it, that things will be directly applicable. I will try to draw out some of the perhaps more generalizable lessons or points, but you are the ones who know your local situation and are therefore most able to figure out what might hold some lesson and insight for what you are trying to do here. I became familiar with the UW-Tacoma story when Brian Coffey and Jan Dieterwetter, did I have it right, Jan? Close enough? Thank you. Yeah, well, I should have it right? No excuses. Wrote a chapter for the book that I did with my colleague David Perry on the university's urban developer, and they wrote a great chapter on sort of how this campus came about. It's a wonderful story. If any of you don't know that chapter, it's really worth reading. And I think origin stories in every culture, the stories of origin matter greatly, the Genesis kind of stories. So our Genesis story begins, as so many Genesis stories, with a flood. And we turned out to have a Noah and everything. Portland State was established in 1946 to serve returning veterans, taking advantage of the GI Bill to serve these people who came back to the city and who couldn't go down to Eugene or Corvallis, where the universities were, because they already were older, they often had a family, they needed a job, so there needed to be a campus in town, and it was created on this island in the river, in the Columbia River, which had been sort of a shipyard village for the workers in the shipyards. And then in 1948, the river rose, there was a flood, and there weren't any Dutchmen around to put their fingers in the dike, so things went wrong. And there was talk about, it's already 1948 by now, maybe we don't need a campus, because our sister institutions didn't really want a campus in the city. At that point, it wasn't even a separate university. It was simply called the Extension Center of the State Board of Higher Education. But already, after those first few years, had been enough enthusiasm generated that people said, we need a campus in Portland for people who live in Portland. And they were given a mothballed high school from the Portland Public Schools called Lincoln High School. They promptly renamed it Old Main. So, there was this whole idea of creating this classic university, right? They right away called it Old Main. And the university started growing. First it became a college, and then it finally became a university. We had to fight every step of the way. Every step of the way, we've had to fight to get the permission to start graduate programs, to start PhD programs. We weren't even allowed to have our own student housing until about 10 years ago because our sister institutions didn't want a competitor. Now, of course, we all get along famously, and they haven't really tried to kill us in the last 15 minutes that I've heard of, at any rate. So I'll come back to that later. Today, we are certainly the most diverse campus. We were the largest campus until a year ago, and then actually Oregon State surpassed us again. We have 29,000 students. Oregon State now is 29,200, but who is counting? University of Oregon, of course, is the other big one, about 25,000 students, the traditional flagship institution. And then there is the Oregon Health and Science University, which is the medical complex, which is just a mile away from us. And then just to round out the picture, there are 4 what we call regional universities in Oregon public. We have very few private universities in Oregon. Lewis and Clark, Reed, University of Portland, very small, very really marginal in terms of their relationship with the city, which matters because basically Portland State is very clearly the big fish in a moderate-sized pond, very different from my experience in Chicago, where, University of Illinois Chicago, same history, same size, merged with the medical center, so it's even really bigger. But there's University of Chicago and Northwestern and DePaul and Loyola and all these other great universities. So it's a very different environment. We now, until last year, we were all governed, all 7 public universities, by the State Board of Higher Education collectively. Again, that state board historically had not always been a friend of Portland State. It had been significantly dominated by the downstate institutions that partly fed why we wanted to have our own board, as did the University of Oregon. And so since July 1, we now have our own board, much more like the Washington model here, where each institution has its own board with sort of a coordinating structure on top of that I won't bore you with unless you want to. And I can talk at great length about that. We have a big footprint. So the sort of, the color doesn't come out here very well. But anyway, we have about 50 acres. Now that's interesting because you have, I understand, 40 acres with about 1/6 of the number of students. So we have 50 acres, 50 buildings. We're a very efficient user of space, I guess is the positive way of describing that. We describe ourselves as an anchor institution or an urban serving institution. Our motto is let knowledge serve the city. That has been our motto since the mid-90s, but it has been a very important part of who we are. As I said, we had to fight for our existence, and we had to fight for the ability to add new programs and get recognized as a university. What that meant was that we had to create connections with the local political establishment, the business community, the labor community, community organizations, and so on, because otherwise we wouldn't have the political support in Salem, in the capital, to get these kind of permissions that we needed. And I think it's very much that history of struggle that both has made PSU a scrappy institution, but has also created that strong connection with the community. We could never pretend to be a global university that just happened to be located in Portland. We always had to be deeply embedded. And of course, again, it was also increased by the fact that our students were working students. We were long described as a commuter school, originally pretty pejoratively, right? That was not exactly, because after all, true education takes place in the ivory tower, somewhere in splendid isolation, not in the midst of the messiness of an urban area. Portland State had to, forced by external circumstances, embrace the messiness of the urban area, and then we turned it into an asset and what we really wanted. So we have this 50 acres, sort of the area that's bounded by the Expressway 405 that you see in the curve there, and we keep building new buildings. I mentioned earlier that I became very popular with the local architects and contractors because I said early on that I always wanted to see a building crane on campus. Because if you have 50 buildings, and the average building lasts about 50 years at most before you have to thoroughly renovate it or rebuild it entirely. So that means you've got to do a building a year. And otherwise you're going to be falling behind. So we've been getting pretty close to that, actually. 2/3 or so of our students come from the Portland metropolitan area and stay there when they graduate. So again, it's that local connection. There's about 20% that comes from out of state. A third of those are international. And then there's about 13% that comes from the rest of Oregon. Our total budget is about $500 million. We have about 3,500 FTE staff. So we have a very significant economic impact. Our overall economic impact is about $1.5 billion. Now, the Portland economy is a very large economy. We're about the 10th largest employer in the metropolitan area. So we're important, we matter. It's not like we dominate a college town, right? It's not that kind of a situation. As I said, we knew long ago that we had to really connect ourselves to the power structure in the broadest sense. That means the communities, business, and the public sector in Portland. And that also drove the kind of programs we were able to start. We very much had to look, we couldn't really grow big in traditional arts and sciences. Because that was dominated by the University of Oregon, and they didn't really want to let us start degrees in there. So yes, we could do the Gen Ed curriculum, but not really develop master's or PhD programs for a long time. So we developed strengths in education, social work, urban planning, which was probably our first really nationally ranked program. And then business and engineering grew later, but have always remained very competitive with the other institutions. And then also our College of the Arts, which has been growing very rapidly and is a great success. In the mid-90s, so all of this is, well, I'm still talking history, well before I came, we institutionalized the work that we had been doing in our curriculum in getting students engaged in real-life projects. And we called this the senior capstone, where every graduating senior has to work in a team of students, so it's a team project, and it has to be a team project with an external partner, a business, community organization, a unit of government. And it has to be a real project. It isn't just play. Now, I know every university has their students work with external organization in some way. But this institutionalization, where every student has to do it, means that we're running 240 capstones a year. And we have literally thousands of students, about 5,000 students a year, doing those projects. So it's an enormous investment in working with and partnering with organizations. Some of those projects are one-offs. A community organization needs a study for something, and many go on for a very long time. For instance, one of our big capstones is that we run the Kiwanis camp for young adults and teenagers with disabilities that's held every summer, by Mount Hood, and we've run that for 20 years. We provide the staff for it, so there's an ongoing one. But we did do the feasibility study for a Mercado in a Latino neighborhood in Portland, and that might be a 2 year project to get that done. So it really spans the range. The business school has developed our own whole set to really provide hands-on technical assistance, primarily focused on minority and small businesses. The other thing that we did was, as this was part of it, totally revamp the whole Gen Ed curriculum, where, instead of the usual Gen Ed, where you take, one from, category A and one from B and one from C, and there's no real connection between them, we created what we call the freshman inquiry and the sophomore inquiry program, where it's a year-long one course that brings in writing and social science and humanities and so on, but it's a topic-based, it's often team-taught or jointly developed. It's a much more integrated way of covering the things that you need to do in a Gen Ed requirement, and it allows for much more time, again, to do applied projects in the community. So it pervades the curriculum. And then the final piece that was instituted at that time was a revision of the promotion and tenure criteria. As we know, that's sort of the core of ultimately how we judge each other, of course, and we very much created space in promotion and tenure criteria for applied work, professional work. There had to be an element of peer review, there had to be an element certainly of discovery and of dissemination, but it was no longer that it was just the refereed article or the book published by a scholarly press that would count towards tenure. Now these changes, which weren't sort of just cooked up de novo by the people who happened to be in charge then, Judith Romali, who many of you may have met at some point, very active still. She's now back in Portland as an emeritus faculty member. But it really built on what we had been doing, but it then was institutionalized, so we began to attract faculty who wanted to work that way, who defined themselves as partners with the community. And it was not a stretch for them. And you get into sort of a virtuous cycle where we attract the faculty who want to do that, the students who want to do that, certainly the students who have choices, who came from out of state. Again, a lot of our students, certainly in the early years, were sort of the students who had no choices. They were place bound, so that's why they came to Portland State. But it's kept strengthening what we were doing and how we were doing it. And it really is deeply ingrained in the culture. And we have really very few conflicts. When I started at the University of Illinois Chicago, I was in '93 asked by the chancellor to start their Great Cities program, which was all about how does UIC serve the metropolitan area. And there were big fights because there were many faculty, especially in the humanities and sort of the bench scientists, who saw this idea of focusing on urban issues as a ploy by the flagship campus down in Urbana to keep Illinois Chicago down, to just say, you guys do this like little do-gooder stuff, work with poor people or something, and that way you won't be a real university. Because again, real universities don't deal with those things. They do, exalted abstract work that nobody cares about. That's sort of the stereotypes that develop. So there we had to have big fights about, no, you can do applied urban work that is new and innovative and creative and that matters and that contributes to knowledge. It's not a sort of a lesser form of knowledge. It's just a different form of both creating knowledge, because you're co-creating it with your partners. It's taken a long time, and even now Illinois Chicago still has that struggle going on, as many universities do. Now, I came about 6.5 years ago, August of 2008. Not a good time to start as university president. Not a good time, We all agreed that yes, there was going to be a little bit of a recession, so things were maybe going to be a little tough for a bit, but that wasn't going to last. Well, obviously, that turned out to be not quite so. I wanted to do, on my first day, I wanted to make sure that I did something that would resonate with people. So this is what I did. I rode my bike from my home together with the mayor of the city to town, to the campus. So to symbolize, of course, both our commitment to sustainability, which had become the overarching intellectual concept that united the campus that we were really dedicated to, and to indicate that we were deeply committed to our partnership with the city in a very broad sense. And the mayor was game, and it got on the front page of the Oregonian, and even now people in Portland will ask me, "Are you still riding your bike?" And I always somewhat sheepishly have to admit that it was a wonderful ride down, but the ride back up was really tough. And even in Portland, the bike paths, certainly up in that direction, aren't always that good. So to make sure that I survived, I don't ride my bike a lot, at least on that route. But it mattered, and I think it set the tone. You know, and that tone has survived, because Sam Adams only turned out to be a one-term mayor. So we have now had a new mayor for the last 2 years, and we have I haven't ridden a bike with him, but we've gone boating, and we have an equally strong relationship. I want to tell about 3 or 4 key stories that I think illustrate how we synchronize with Portland and our commitment as a long-term institutionalized civic partner. And again, you know, all universities have parts of these stories. I think we probably have a lot of them, but it may hold some ideas for you. The first story is around sustainability, because what had happened, as I said, that the year before I came, the campus had actually had a discussion about, is there anything that unites us intellectually beyond engagement? We all knew that community engagement was a big thing. As I said, the motto, "Let knowledge serve the city." Is there a substantive area as well? So after much debate, they came up with the notion of sustainability, with both the environmental aspects of it, the economics aspect, and the social justice aspect, and the equity aspects of it. So you can see pretty much everybody could find a home in that, right? Social work, urban planning, engineers, you know, so you know, it wasn't that everybody's now doing it, but it was a strong concept. And then we got a request, and this was happening just as I came in. A local foundation said they wanted to make a very major gift, $25 million, $2.5 million a year over 10 years, in a local institution that would really make a difference for Portland. And they polled their 7 trustees and gave them a list of about 20 institutions, you know, the symphony, the ballet, the art museum, this community organization, whatever, different universities. Which institution do you think we should make this investment in? And they unanimously chose Portland State to make that investment in. So they came and talked to us and said, if we gave you this kind of money, what would you do with it? Well, you know, like many of you in the room, we know how to get grants. So we knew what kind of things this foundation funded, and they'd funded a lot in the arts. And we said, we think we can really make a difference in the arts. And they kind of talked to us, and they said, you know what? We just don't believe it. We just don't believe that that's where your heart is. You got a good story. I mean, we can tell stories, but we just don't believe it. Come back with something that you really mean. So we said, well, you know, if you really want to know what we mean, you know, we really believe in sustainability. And that's where we feel we can make a national difference, a global difference. And we talked it through, and then they said, okay, we will give you the money for that. And it was really interesting because these were the trustees who were giving away the money of a buddy of theirs, James Miller, who had been a big investor, and he owned forest lands and all that. And the chairman of the board of trustees told me, if Jimmy knew that we were giving his money for sustainability, he'd turn in his grave. He had a bumper sticker that said, "Earth first, we'll log the other planets later." So they were not about sustainability, but they were about, and I tell this story because it signifies it was about, they believed in the role of an anchor institution, of an institution that can really change the city. And that's what it was to them, that's what it was about. It wasn't about sustainability per se. But so we had to match the money one-on-one, and it turned out that was very easy because, you know, we could count research grants, so we've matched it every year with at least $3 to $6 million in research grants and other things. We haven't yet matched it very well with endowment funds, which I would like. Now, we organized then, and I'm not going to go into extensive detail, we created an Institute for Sustainable Solutions. I know you can't really read this. This is sort of an overview of, that institute does a lot of things. Just a couple of examples. We supported a number of student-led projects, like ban the bottles, to ban drinking water bottles, and make sure that we only use water that comes out of faucets and all that. That's been a great success. We started something called the Urban Sustainability Accelerator with foundation funding in top of the Miller money, where 8 cities from around the country are sending teams to Portland to observe efforts there related to air quality, neighborhood planning, public transportation, and so on. And it becomes a mutual learning community. We teamed with Wells Fargo to sponsor a competition to develop new ways to solve environmental problems, better solar cells, better ways of doing local agriculture. We started a Center for Public Interest Design, a wonderful project in architecture. They developed a new modular classroom. Most modular classrooms are both unpleasant and unhealthy because they have all these artificial materials, they off-gas, they don't have enough windows or air circulations, they're only supposed to last for a little while, and most schools get stuck with the modular classroom for, forever. So they developed a green modular classroom, which was really nice. So it was a real problem related to sustainability, great hands-on project for our students, and it's now a business that is selling these modular classrooms throughout the United States, and it's beginning to generate money. So it's a really wonderful thing. Started something called the Sustainable Neighborhood Initiative, where student teams will repeatedly, through these capstone projects, work with 4 neighborhoods in the city to develop aspects of sustainability and planning and pedestrian safety, bike paths, local food culture, and so on. And all of this is building, again, on many years of effort. Probably the most visible aspects of that was that for our campus, even though we're still largely a commuter campus, we only have 3,000 beds on campus, only 25% of our students, faculty, and staff, only 25% use private transportation to come to campus. About 50% uses public transportation, the rest walks or bikes. And I always tell people that didn't just happen because we were in the right location. We invested in the public transportation system. We issued bonds that then could be used by the local transportation agency to match federal money to build the streetcar, to build the light rail. And because of that, we have the 4 busiest public transportation stops are on our campus. And so now any future public transportation line has to connect up with us and with those lines, because we are like the spider in the middle of the web. So, but that's really thinking ahead, being willing to make investments, and then seeing it pay off literally over the decades. Another project that we really liked in this is one of our students, Amelia Pay, who started essentially a mobile grocery cart that is used to sell high-quality food in the food deserts, in those poor neighborhoods where people don't have cars, where the public transportation sometimes doesn't go, especially in East Portland, and where they can bring high-quality food. Whole Foods liked it so much that they bought her out, and she's now in charge of developing that model nationwide. Really a great success that we're very, very proud of. Starting other businesses, this shows one of our engineering students, Ryan Jensen, who grew up on a farm just outside of the city, and he developed a precision drone that can apply weed killer or fertilizer in a highly targeted way, and that too has now become a company that is going nationwide. And it's one of our companies, it's called Honeycomb. It's one of 31 companies located in our Portland State Business Accelerator, which is essentially a business incubator. Not all those businesses have to be started by Portland State students or faculty. Some of them are started by others, and they just use our faculty or students as consultants or interns or workers. And it drew more of the venture capital in Oregon than any other place in the state. So it's been a great success, and many of those have a sustainability aspect, not all of them. The second part of the story I want to tell you is about structure, and it's about both internal structure and external structure. When I came, we had a vice provost for research, but not a vice president for research. There had been sort of a push to perhaps develop a vice president for research because we wanted to grow our research activities. And we have grown it from 40 million to 60 million in the last 6 years. We also didn't actually, with all our efforts around engagement and community activity, we didn't have a university office of engagement. And so people would complain, as they often do with big universities, about, how do you access the university? Who do you go to? Who do you call when you want a project? And some people would have figured it out, but others still felt, listen, you're a big place. So I wondered about, do we need a front door that is more visible? So we created something called the Office of Strategic Partnerships, but we combined it with the Office of Research. So we said, since so much of our research is about applied work, it's about partnerships with local businesses or local institutions, instead of having research sitting here, remember what I told you about the UIC challenge of the researchers are here and the people who do engaged work are over there and never the twain shall meet. I said, no, we're going to have an Office of Research and Strategic Partnership to really signal to people that this is all of one cloth. This is a continuum, and it feeds each other. Things start as an applied helping kind of partnership, and they become a research project, and other things go the other way. And that has been working very well. And the Office of Strategic Partnerships, while it does not control, we have thousands of partnerships, right? So you can't have any one place to control it, much less not even keep track of it. But from the vice president in charge, the associate vice president in charge of strategic partnerships does a lot of the bigger ones, the ones with the city, with some of the big companies. They make sure that things get done, that the people from those outside organizations know who to talk to, and then anybody who needs access knows to go there, and they can help them find the right person. So that's how we structured it internally. The part that we did externally is to say we should create formal memoranda of understanding with our ongoing partners, rather than let it depend on the initiative of a particular faculty member and then have things fall through the cracks. Let's write down the expectations. So with several of our bigger partners, we developed an MOU which specifies, this person is in charge of it. Once a year, the president and the CEO will meet. These are the goals for this year. They will be meeting every year to figure out what the goals are for next year. This is how it will be funded. We'll jointly go after grants, or the company will fund it, whatever it may be for the different case. And it has brought a level of transparency, predictability, accountability that otherwise is often missing in sort of the loose world of universities, where, as you know, it's 500 entrepreneurs held together by a common parking problem. So, this makes it much more predictable for people. So one of our key partners, and this is our new collaborative life sciences building, which is a joint building between us, Oregon Health and Sciences University, which has its dental school and a lot of its medical related research labs there, and Oregon State University, which has its pharmacy program there. We now do almost all of our biology and chemistry classes there. It's about a mile from our campus, either a 13-minute walk or a 10-minute streetcar ride. The streetcar doesn't go very fast. You can kind of outwalk it on a good day. But for a rainy day, it's really nice. So we have done this joint building. We're going to start a joint School of Public Health. We have a lot of joint faculty appointments. We have a joint Master's in Public Health. One of our chemistry professors is working with OHSU's cancer researchers to reduce the side effects of cancer treatments. Just a whole bunch of things going on, and having a joint building. And I heard earlier about your building with the Y for your rec center. I mean, and there's the example of San Jose State, which has the joint library. I mean, these are really the ways to go in the future, because we can't afford to do it just all by ourselves. Another example of that kind of a systematic partnership is with Portland General Electric, our local utility, where we started a lot of emphasis on electric cars. We have something called Electric Avenue, which is a one-block stretch in our campus, where we have 6 different chargers that were donated by the companies that make electrical car chargers. And we're doing research on how well they work, how often they break down, which ones get used the most. Out of that came a focus on transmission lines, and we have a faculty member that's specializing on that, and also a focus on helping Portland General Electric with their transition from their coal burning plant in Boardman to one that will burn agricultural materials, just stuff that gets grown, but there are issues with that, so we're doing a lot of research around that. As you know, often when you start to have a partnership, new things come up. You begin to know each other, and you find, oh, I can help you with this. Oh, you're wrestling with that. I know somebody who can do that. It can't always be figured out all in advance. It takes place organically when you have long-term partnerships. Another strong partnership we have is with Intel, the largest employer in Oregon, 17,000 employees. We supply more of their labor than anybody else does. We started a STEM Center for College and Career Readiness. Their initial support, we just got a $1 million NSF grant to help elementary school teachers improve their science teaching. Again, that wasn't part of the original plan, but it just developed over time. The largest, perhaps, of those is, which is the third story, is All Hands Raised, which is a Cradle to Career partnership. How many of you are familiar with that term, a Cradle to Career partnership? It's modeled after a program that was started in Cincinnati called Strive. It basically says, you gotta think about the whole education system as a pipeline, where traditionally, of course, universities have said, well, we could do a better job in education if only the high schools did a better job. But, the graduates we get, they can't read, they can't write, they can't do arithmetic. And the high schools, of course, say, well, we could do a better job if the grade schools did a better job. And the grade schools, of course, basically say, well, if only mom did a better job, right? Because there's nobody else left to blame. We said, no, it's a pipeline. We're all responsible for it. We train more teachers for the Portland Public Schools than anybody else does. So if that goes wrong, we're to blame. So we created this organization out of 3 existing organizations. We killed 3 organizations and replaced it with just 1. That doesn't happen a lot. That involves now schools, businesses, social service agencies, higher education. And the idea is that this is an evidence-based program with interventions at key points of improvement. And the key points that are based on the literature is, are kids enrolled in kindergarten? Do they read at grade level at 3rd grade? Do they do algebra by 6th? Do they attend in 9th grade? That's like one of the single best predictors of whether you'll graduate, simply how many hours you attend in 9th grade. And then do you make that transition to either a career or to college? And our role in that has been that, we started it. We brought the Strive model to Portland. We convened the meetings. We did the original research to kind of say where are we at and what does the literature say. We continue to be like on the boards and participate in the for various interventions, and we are a very important sort of legitimator for the whole effort. It's just a great role, and I've played a big role, the Dean of Education, individual faculty, and again, it's built on decades of legitimacy that we'd gained by having our faculty work with schools, by having trained all those teachers. So you can't just come in, new to town and say, listen, I got this great idea. But it was a wonderful way to take advantage of that organic growth. I'm going to skip the urban renewal story for now because I want to leave time for questions. I can elaborate on it if there are questions on that because it's a further case of sort of institutionalization. So let me just give you the concluding thoughts here. The biggest thing, of course, here is that no president can tell a faculty what kind of work to do. Faculty choose their areas of research, their areas of applied work, the nature of their courses. So none of this came about because a university president said we're going to do this. It grew out of a long history that, however, was guided and steered. I wouldn't want to be a president if you couldn't do anything, right? If all I do is count the money, then it's not very interesting. So Judith Romali, my predecessor 2 presidents ago, who said, let's systematize how we're going about the curriculum, and then a lot of faculty enthusiasm that helps create that, and that took time. And then, as I said, it gets into this virtuous cycle where it begins to grow on itself in ways that nobody could necessarily predict. And then it begins to attract the students who further reinforce that commitment. We have now built our brand. That's why the Miller Foundation came to us and wanted to do it, which further legitimated this approach to what academia is about. Getting bigger helped. One of your challenges is that you're still a small institution. You only have so many faculty. They're being asked to do a lot. You only have so many staff. Now, I also got to say, while I know that you don't have enough money to do all the good work that you do, you have a lot more money than we do, all right? You have a lot more money. There is not an institution in this country that doesn't lack money to do the things that they would like to do. Because the moment you say, I got all the money in the world, you obviously have stopped hoping and dreaming. But you have more money, so that cannot be an excuse for not doing the things that you want to do. And you have an outstanding brand. One of the struggles Portland State always had, that we didn't have that big brand. We were this upstart community college that wasn't nearly as prestigious as the University of Oregon and Oregon State. And you'll still hear that some in Portland. It's a dying number, but you still hear it. So you got that great brand. You were started, as I understand and remember your history, really because the community wanted it. You didn't have to fight the system to get it. So you have those great connections. And then, the final point is sort of this theory of change that, again, you'll always have faculty and others who say, well, we can't do this until you fix that. We can't do this work until you change promotion and tenure or until you reorganize the departments. But that's not how change happens. You know that. Change happens because people want it and people start working it. And then you create the momentum which makes those structural changes happen. And then the time will be right to make that big structural change. But if you sit around and wait, there will never be the momentum, there will never be the constituency. And if my presentation tonight has helped just a tiny bit, continuing to help you on that path, I will have achieved my and Ali's purpose, I hope. Thank you very much.